Coming to that job and understanding the crisis we are in, and coming from managerial positions, I remember that the worst thing is under-communicating at the time of change. So I made a point for myself of spending at least 1 day per week in the regions of Ukraine. I have visited Kharkiv 3 times, Donetsk once, it was my first trip. There was also 3 trips to the west of the country. And every time I did have something like this, something very close to the town hall meeting. I had 450 students in Donetsk. I had 400 businesses and students in Lviv, Ukrainian Catholic University. That was actually my best time. Because that's how we get the feedback. That's how we get the reaction. That's where we can explain what's going on in the country. And that's actually how we plan to have this discussion with you. You know, dancing the investor attractiveness dance at the beat of the machine gun is probably not the best idea. Okay? So maybe next year, when the situation will be quieter, we will do a more kind of more usual investment presentation. Now, I think you want to have the answers to your concerns. And if I get it right, I think there are 3 major concerns that you probably have. Concern number 1, and by the way, and please correct me if I'm wrong, okay? So concern number 1, are you guys really controlling your country? Concern number 2 is, what are you guys going to do with this, as Tom Friedman wrote, breathtaking corruption, which you had already for years, if not decades? And number 3, are you fiscally solvent and sound? And what are you going to do about this? So am I getting more or less right? Okay, so if there are some other major concerns, let me know, and I'll be happy to address them too, or of course our distinguished panel will do that too. So concern number 1. Well, first of all, we are heading into presidential elections in 10 days. Free, democratic presidential elections. We still cannot for sure predict whether we will have just 1 round or 2 rounds, and who is the winner, well, we have more or less, I would say, 2 clear front runners. All of that are the features of the, if not maturing democracy. And that makes me quite happy. We want to ensure, of course, that election is done all through the all territory of Ukraine. And it's not only my position that we do lack a strong president at the helm of Ukrainian government hierarchy. We need the counterpart to talk to other presidents. We need the counterpart who can command and control the defense and the army. We need the unifying person who can talk to the whole country on the one hand, and to the other countries on behalf of Ukraine. Now, I'm hinting at that because our hope is that the situation will start to stabilize after May 25th. Because as we know, there are just quarters and forces inside and outside of the country who are not very happy with Ukraine having this election. Now, we do need the president. I mean, we still have this parliamentary presidential republic, so the president still needs to be there. So that's number 1. Number 2 is we just launched the national dialogue. It started yesterday with co-chaired by 2 of our previous presidents. See, again, you know, one of the features why presidents are needed. So when they retire, they can have the national dialogue. And that's the dialogue that actually all the members of the government had during the last 2 months. And that's what we plan to do as long as we are in the government. Because, you know, we are like this. We came from the street, we had this dialogue on Maidan. I don't think that anybody in the government has this authoritarian kind of feature that it used to be in Ukraine and some other countries. So the dialogue is the way to resolve problems. And by the way, not only national, but international too. I think that we should sit and discuss issues with all of our neighbors, Russia too. That's why in my first week of being the minister, I called my counterpart, Alexei Ulyukayev, the Minister of the Economy of Russia. I have to be frank, I introduced myself not only as the Minister of Economy of Ukraine, but also as a visiting professor of Russian Presidential Academy of National Economy and Public Service. Maybe that's why, you know, the reason that I got the phone call in half an hour back and Minister was on the phone. We had a professional discussion about the economy issues because there are so many issues that unite us, you know. How to transform economy from resource-based to intellectual-based, to knowledge-based. You know, how to move up in the ranking of ease of doing business, how to attract investments, and so on and so on. We spend maybe 80% of our time talking about these issues. And I told my colleague that, look, I would rather discuss these issues than pointing guns at each other. We are economists. We know that trade is mutually beneficial. Pointing guns at each other is mutually destructive, as, by the way, we see in some of the regions in Ukraine. And not, by the way, not only in Ukraine. We also had some other opportunities to discuss the issues with First Deputy Prime Minister Shuvalov and so on. So my colleagues in the government, the foreign ministers had their own discussions. The point is we are open for discussions, and that's where we, by the way, we want to discuss the gas price, we wanted to discuss the gas debt, and discuss these issues at the table. So national and international dialogues. And then the third thing, which within this first pillar, do we control the country? The third thing is, of course, most probably through these national dialogues, what we will see is this topic of decentralization that we fully back. The power was really over-centralized during the last decades, probably, in the capital of the country. 21st century is not like this. 21st century is about decentralization, and that's what we need to do in the country too. And by the way, the country is quite diversified, and we understand that. And of course, all my dialogues that I do in the East, I do in Russian, as all of my colleagues do so as well. It's actually, many people are asking me, so is it tougher in Donetsk or in Lviv? And I'm coming to my second issue, which is corruption. I say, you know what, it's actually tougher in Lviv, in the west of the country. Because in the East, you know, I appear in front of them, and they look at me, and they most probably think, is he fascist or not? And, you know, and the guy speaks Russian, and he teaches in a number of Russian schools and have a number of Russian friends. Doesn't really look like fascist. Okay, you know, so we can listen to him. Now, in Lviv, in the West, the situation is quite different. The meeting that I had with 400 businesses in Lviv was exactly 1 month after we were appointed to the government. Most of the talk that I heard was the following. You are 1 month in the government, you still did not change the tax system? 2 weeks ago, I wrote to you about this on Facebook, and you still did not change the tax system. Now, what I'm hinting at is the strong pressure that we all feel to perform, to deliver. Maidan is still there. That's what I'm telling myself, and that's what I'm telling my colleagues. I made a point, another point, in my daily routine. I walk through Maidan twice a day, to my work and from my work. I mostly use subway. And that's to remind myself, first of all, the huge expectations that the country has, that's number one, and the huge price that the country paid for this reform. Again, being quite active in social media, you can see the comments on my Facebook, and I see them, you know, every morning, at least. Where are the reforms? Where are the reforms? Why not reforms? You know, the best way to wake up in the morning, really. You know, just open my Facebook, and you know, I don't need coffee after that. I don't need coffee. So it's not only you who demand reforms, it's the Ukrainian people who demand reform, actually much more than, to be honest, than international investors. You're so far polite. People pay the huge price, you know, for us to deliver. We understand that. And we also understand if we do not deliver, for example, by fall, I'm quite sure there would be a different panel with some of the different faces and people. Because people are not very patient. You know, they are saying, we brought you to the government, we paid the huge price, you know, do it. Now, some of the things that we already did regarding the corruption. One of the first acts that were adopted by the parliament during our tenure is the new Procurement Act. Because public procurement was one of the biggest channels of corruption in the country in the past. we have developed the law which was certified by European Union, the World Bank, and Transparency International as corruption-free and transparent. Prime Minister himself, and I actually thank him for this very much, he introduced it to the Parliament and got it supported. It was not easy because we got only one vote majority, but we got it. So it's a new procurement law. And I also have to tell you that during the preparation work, we had public activists from Maidan being very active in the working group, making sure that it's really corruption-free. And I was the leader of that group for some time. I benchmarked with them, like, very much in this format. Are we there? Do we still have some loopholes? How do we close these loopholes? And so on. Now, I'm also very happy about the EBRD Anti-Corruption Initiative, which was signed on Monday by the EBRD President and the Ukrainian Prime Minister. It's an unprecedented experience, from what I understand. And EBRD brings the image, the trust of the international institution that you can trust in the future too. So we are fully backing that effort too. We will have the ombudsman that will speak on your behalf and will draw our attention in the government to the potential abuses or mishandlings or some other imperfections that we still might have in this fight against corruption. Now, the third thing and the final thing is the fiscal position of the country. Now, when we came to the government, it was absolutely clear that the country is addicted. That's how I would call it. It's a chronic double deficit addiction. That's the diagnosis that we have. The first deficit is a fiscal deficit. We had it for years, if not decades. And at the end of February, the deficit was approaching a double-digit number. And the second deficit was a trade deficit, also approaching a double-digit numbers. So the solution is, by the way, the recipe is pretty clear. And that's what we had to do, and we had no other choice to do. We reduced the fiscal deficit in half, in line, actually probably even more so than IMF and other institutions' expectations. That gave us a chance to receive the first tranche of the 17 billion loan from IMF. Yesterday, we priced our euro bonds backed and guaranteed by the US government. This probably would be the best issue in our history, obviously. $1 billion. And day before yesterday, the Prime Minister and my colleague and good friend, Minister of Finance, Alexander Schlapak, signed the agreement with the European Union, total $1.35 billion to bring into the country. Now, of course, that covers our short-term gaps. Now, we need to relaunch, and I will close with that. We need to relaunch the engines of our own internal growth. And by the way, when people, and when the journalists especially, are asking me, when will austerity bite? How deep the country will go? I would frankly say, I don't think we should expect something that other countries had when they introduced the austerity measures. Because those who were in business in Ukraine during the last 3 or 4 years and not connected to the government or the budget probably knows that was worse than austerity. Because you were raided, because you couldn't protect your property in the courts, most probably, in many cases, VAT would not be returned, and many, many other things. So it was worse than austerity. And by the way, trying to find some silver lining, you probably see the statistics, for example, for the first quarter, and you probably see that the economic situation is actually much better than public finance situation. So it's not nearly as bad it was in 2009. It's still in minus, not such a big minus. Of course, we want to have plus 7 or 8% as China has, or plus 5% as Malaysia has. We have a small minus, but it's not a drastic minus. And somehow I would think that this austerity, the fiscal austerity that we have, would not have such a dramatic effect as in other countries, because we had the business austerity during the last 3 or 4 years, if not more. So 2 engines of growth, and I will finish with that. One is the small and medium enterprise, and that's why we are doing quite a serious deregulation campaign, an effort, and the program. We are being advised by a number of advisors, EBRD included, Georgian reformers included. When I'm talking in the ministry that we need to be in the top 10 of ease of doing business, of course, get all the skeptical and impossible views. It's just impossible. We are 112. I said, yes. But I had an honor of advising the government of the country, which is number 6 in that ranking, and it's Malaysia. You know, they did it. Georgia is the member country of EBRD, the country of operations, number 8 in that ranking. What's wrong with us? You know, Russia wants to be number 20, at least in the top 20 of that ranking, you know. So we cannot have the goal of being just top 100. We have to be in top 10. Well, of course, not this year. It will take some time. But we are benchmarking with that experience. The 4 laws are already adopted by the Parliament. We are introducing another 16. I think 6 of them are already in the Parliament, and the rest we are finalizing, so that will give the opportunity to simplify and make the business much less expensive in the country. And the final engine, and probably last but as we say not least, is that in order to cure this trade imbalance, of course, we need to have export promotion. We need to jumpstart the export opportunities, and we are thankful to the European Union that unilaterally at the moment eliminated or reduced the import tariffs for the Ukrainian goods, so that we have, you know, another opportunity to increase our export. Finishing and summing it up, I mentioned that Ukraine is a diversified country. I mean, we can see that. How do we hold it all together? And that's something I did learn in Southeast Asia and other regions. Those who know the Ukrainian language, you know that the word "tsil," well, "tsilistnis," which is integrity, territorial integrity, and "tsil," which is goal, purpose, is the same root words. So in order to have territorial integrity, and not only the territorial integrity, if you want to have your personal integrity, you need to have a goal. So the goal for all of us, I think that probably every person in Ukraine would share that we do want to have democratic, open, and prosperous Ukraine. And how do we get that, and how do we achieve that, and the details of that, I would like to pass the word to Serhiy Yevtushenko with some of the specifics of our investment program. Thank you.